What's up guys, it's Volka. In this video I want to go over my almost 30 builds that I have on max roll, all updated for season 4. Some of them completely new and some of them builds from previous seasons, just updated fully. So I think I have like 28 builds, so there's quite a bit of things to go through. So this video won't have any gameplay, so I just don't have time to make like a gameplay video for everything. Some of these have video guides attached to them, like with gameplay and stuff. I made a couple of videos already for Warlock. But let's start with the Acolyte here. So we have Flame Whip Warlock. So this one is basically you're using this sword here, Spine of Melatros. It makes the Fisher spirits be like these like flame whips instead. And this one goes physical damage because now you can convert this to physical. And it's kind of like playing Torment Warlock, but you're doing actually good damage. So it's crit damage, physical damage. And you can scale the damage more with like bleed chance and stuff like that. So this is gonna be bleed scaling instead of ignite scaling when you convert it to physical. And we'll still go for the same Warlock core as on the other Warlock builds, like Ripblood for damage and for the buffs and stuff, and Marrow Shards for more AoE. The AoE has been kind of an issue with just Flame Whip, so this is really good for boss, the Flame Whips, but the AoE can be just like not enough if that's your only skill. So you do want other stuff as well, and Bone Curse, Aura VK. So I have this set up on pretty much every Warlock with Acid Skin Amulet and stuff. So you can find more like Warlock information on the build guides I made, and of course in the macro guide as well. So that's the idea here. So Flame with Warlock, and this is also low life. So that's kind of a downside on this. You kind of have to go low life, so you're not going to be really tanky on this build, because we need the increased damage buffs for the crit. So basically the melee Lich here is going to be increased damage with this passive. So you disable the Lich and it's going to be increased damage. So you want to be low life to get enough increased damage and stuff like that. And since we don't have any Lich, of course, so you couldn't play as an HP build. And yeah, I think that's pretty much covers this build, like the base idea. So we're gonna go through this pretty fast, otherwise it's gonna be a very long video. And then Ripblood Warlock and Profane Veil. I already made full videos on this full build guide, so you can go watch those. This one has the Ripblood Marrow Shards set up for damage, and that's how you deal your damage. You get the flat damage attacking from Fisher. And same thing for Profane Veil, except Marrow Shard is gonna be Profane Veil instead, and this is your main damage with the Profane Orbs. So you can check these out. These also have gameplay on the other build videos. You have gameplay there. And the last one for Warlock, I also updated the Torment Warlock, a classic from launch of the game. It's still quite weak, so you can't really make this like crazy damage or anything like that. But it's like actually decent now, and the AoE is very, very good. Like that's definitely the best thing about this build, is the AoE clear very fast. Going low life on this also, just like on the Flame Whip. And this one you don't really build Leech though, so you just want to disable the Leech and go low life. And still going for Ripblood, Marrow Shards, and Bone Curse, because Torment itself is not gonna be enough damage. Basically, the like dots overall, like damage over time stuff, it's just not gonna scale as high, and they have nerfed this like many times in the past. So, but you can clear with just Torment pretty much, but you need other stuff for single target. So this is still quite similar to the previous Torment setup in like I guess how it works, but it's much easier to play now. You just spam Ripblood and you drop the Fisher, and that's pretty much it. Like Bone Curse, Aura, no more like casting on hit or something like that. Just have the Aura around you like on every other Warlock, and you spawn Chaos Bolts with the Fisher and tormenting and stuff like that. So you can check this out as well. It's definitely the weakest out of those out of these Warlock builds, but still very fun for mapping and stuff like that. Not really a bossing build though. And for Lich, we have these 3 builds. So Harvest Flay, very popular last season, still good, but it lost damage. So that's the sad part, because this wasn't like giga high damage anyway, but it was okay damage. Like it was like solid damage, but you lost the Doom belt. So that's a bit of a shame. But this build is also really good because you actually did have issues getting endurance, so getting 20 endurance from the belt is really good, and you're gonna be tankier now with that, and you can go for, you know, a bit of a different setup now since you get the endurance. You don't need to get it on the ring, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, losing the damage is sucks, of course. But this has a full gameplay video and everything from last patch. It's still the same build, like nothing actually changed with the build, just adding the new idol setup. Also, the thing with this build, like there's not really like any crazy idols for melee on Acolyte, so you're just building HP, and I'm using the armor altar, so you can get. I mean, it's gonna be tankier than last patch, which is nice, you know. This is actually 500 armor from just the altar, like, so that's nice. But yeah, otherwise the same build. Nothing has changed except the belt and the idols. And Chaos Bolts, I made quite a big improvements on this. So going for Snowblind, basically we're converting Chaos Bolts to cold. So you can get this node here for physical dot multiplier, basically. So bleed. This is a bleed build, so you can get more bleed damage by stacking cold res. So we stack a decent amount on this. Endgame planner has like 150, so that's gonna be quite a bit of more damage. And then you can also get the blind here from the helmet, just like on the harvest build. So you don't need to build crit avoidance. So this is quite nice. And you also get more armor and stuff. So basically much better setup than last patch, just by going for the conversion. And you get a lot of HP now with the pyramid setup. Maybe you can get pretty crazy with the idols. So that does more damage and is tankier, basically, but otherwise the same build. I guess you could say the cold conversion is a downside in some ways, because the visual is going to be cold. You're not going to have the physical like visual for the Chaos Bolt, but that's only, you know, like a visual change. And then Flay Mana Lich, so this is the only S tier build for Lich at the moment that we have on max roll. Still the same crazy damage and stuff like that. I changed to Traitor's Tongue and Reliquary Nest just to be like get easier with the items. The T8 dagger is better, like it's higher damage, but it's just so hard to get. And especially now with the corruptions, I don't think you want to go for any exalted if possible. So Traitor's Tongue and Reliquary Nest, very easy to get. These items instead of the T8, and then you just go for the mana idols like before. I'm going for this altar, so this setup is going to be quite a bit tankier than last patch. I ditched the frenzy belt and went for the endurance belt. Then, you know, you get the armor from the altar as well, like 500 armor, and you can get this like mana per corrupted idol. So you corrupt every idol and you get extra mana. So this build wants to stack a lot of mana for damage. But yeah, overall it's like the same build as last, but like nothing changed, no nerfs. Alright, and then on Sentinel, let's start with the Void Knight. So Sentinel, I have a lot of builds. I think I have every build except a couple on that, you know, from all the macro builds. So Sentinel, we have a lot of things to go through. So Abyssal Echoes, new build for this patch. So this basically got like damage tripled in this patch. It was previously like quite low damage. So they actually tripled the base damage here and the damage effectiveness. So this has 300% damage effectiveness now. This also plays really nicely because it has good AoE, and you're like it's kind of like a Smite Void Knight but better. So better AoE, and it's more damage, and has the same like long range playstyle and all that stuff. The tree I think is pretty simple on this. There's not much like multipliers to get. You get all the multipliers you can. You get the node that makes Abyssal Echoes hit. So of course you need this node. Normally this doesn't even like deal any damage, like hit damage. You need to make it a no cooldown skill with this, and you want a bunch of mana efficiency. So this is like a very high mana cost skill, so 40 mana cost base with this node. So you do need a bunch of stuff for this. So you need the staff first thing. So this has minus mana cost. It's also a very high damage weapon, and so you must have this, and you also must have idols. So you need at least one idol if you have other items, but I think most people will need 2 idols. They're not going to be max rolled most of the time, so you need this void spell mana efficiency on the prefix here. So Reliquary Nest will buff it, and so that's also important. So you get 2 idols plus Reliquary Nest, and then you're gonna be fine with the mana, because we have, of course, Void Well on Void Knight. So we don't really build much mana on this, but you get like 300 mana, so that's gonna be enough with the mana efficiency. And if you get something like the altar here, effect of prefix on top of that, I think at some point you will be able to drop one of these mana efficiency prefixes and go for vitality instead, or you can build more cast speed. So basically, you don't want to overbuild on cast speed, because you can't sustain the mana anyways until you have better gear. So this, like how many idols you need and stuff like that, depends on your gear, but the base setup is basically 2 idols with mana efficiency, and then the relic, and then the staff. So other than that, this setup is going for max vitality. So we are having like over 100 vitality on the endgame setup. I'm going for the Crab Ring and Tundra Helm combo here. So basically you disable your evade, so you just like unbind the evade pretty much, because it's unusable, and then you get very nice stats. So you get reduced crit, you know, it's a very easy item to get, and then the Crab Ring, all attributes, vitality. Basically trying to get rid of any exalteds on any build that I have, so it's easy to, you know, get the items and then corrupt them, because corruptions are quite crazy. So yeah, if you don't, you know, if you want to get your evade, just use Leonine Helmet and like Flames of Midnight, for example. But also like something like the Frenzy here is kind of useless, because you actually don't really want the cast speed, at least on the end game setup, because of the mana. Passives and stuff are pretty normal meta stuff for Void Knight. Void Well, very important, of course, on these types of builds, getting all the vitality. This node is also nice, so you get extra echo chance for Abyssal Echoes. Right, and then on Warpath, we're going for pretty much the same setup as before, just new idol setup added, and of course the big change is the Warrior's Fury is no longer uncapped. So what happens is we unspect these points here, because these were, I mean, low value anyways, and we now max out the Warrior's Fury node. So this should be sustainable with 1k mana, with 5 nodes here, if you have the T8 reduced channel cost. If that is the case in the actual game, then you only need about 1k mana to sustain 5 points. So basically that means you don't need to build more mana than that. There's really no gain. So you no longer go for all the mana possible. You just get what you need to sustain 5 points. And if you have, you know, lower gear, then you just take out points from here. You know, you start with 1 point, and you know, you go up from there based on your gear, basically. So I feel like some people are saying like Warpath is dead or something. I think it's actually buffed, because like for normal gameplay. So now you can just channel forever. You get your optimal amount of mana, and you know, then you invest into other stats instead of going for full mana. And this also should you know, get rid of all the kind of like abuse cases where people were like weapon switching and stuff. So I really like the change, and this is basically 10 seconds scaling, so with max points you get 1000% more damage. So I mean, it's gonna be pretty crazy still. I mean, it's gonna be absolutely crazy. And yeah, I feel like this build is actually buffed. So now we don't need any mana idols here, and you can go for full vitality, melee void damage, crazy idols. You can get the shred here also. So if you get both of the shred idols, you don't need it on the gloves anymore. So you can just you know, go with the idols only for shred, which is nice. You get the pyramid setup. So with prefix effect, suffix effect is nice. This is gonna be a crazy amount of damage, and lots of vitality, also nice for HP. 1 mana idol just to fill the slot here. We don't care about the cooldown, so the actual pyramid like cooldown is meaningless. So we just go for the best idol setup. Other than that, I mean, it's the same build. Only thing I changed is Falcon Fist on the endgame planner, because, you know, getting rid of the Exalted and all that. So instead of using Eternal Gauntlets, just get this very easy. And aspirational, we have a bunch of corruptions. So you can now get Frenzy, Perma Frenzy on Warpath, which is insane. So you could never get this before unless you used the Frenzy helmet. But yeah, so that's crazy. And then still going for T8 reduced channel cost, very, the best thing. So of course the helmet is gonna be not so easy to get, but I mean it's the only like hard item to get really. Everything else is just 1 LP stuff. But the T8 is crazy value, so definitely the best. Stuff like melee attack speed corruption on the axe is insane. Again, it's like double attack rate on Warpath, so attack speed is absolutely crazy. You can get a bunch of damage. You can get movement speed on potion, effect of haste, and stuff like that. So pretty crazy stuff with the corruptions. Very good build. And then on Erasing Strike, also the same case that it's very similar to the previous one. Full legendaries, Falcon Fists, same thing. Similar idol setup, but going for echo damage on the idols. I'm using Mask of Indifference on the endgame planner, so this is easy to get instead of going for the T8 on endgame, and then I go T8 here. Basically no change on this except the idols and corruptions. There's some crazy stuff here, like the more damage corruption. T7 is kinda insane, so you get like 20% more damage and plus the increase. You can also go for brutality, but I mean, you basically get rid of all your armor and stuff, so it's an option. You can use it if you want like softcore stuff. And on Multistrike Smite, I now went for the dual wield setup. So this is actually very high damage, So this is on par with something like Erasing Strike. Very good build, high damage build. It is low AoE though, so for maps and stuff, it's not like, I mean, Erasing Strike is for sure overall better because the AoE is so massive and stuff like that. It's also very easy to build like gear. So dual wielding with Aurelis and Ladle, getting the mask here for the stun immunity and stuff. Then going for T8 version of it on Leonine. So the T8 spell affixes a lot of damage. And again, you could still go for mask if you want to do that. Vitality stacking on this build, so it's similar to something like Abyssal Echoes or Smite VK. Vitality stacking for damage on Smite. Multistrike, we proc the Smite with Multistrike, and you deal a lot of damage. So plays like a melee build, but you deal spell damage on this build. And kind of a similar build, very similar. So this is a self-cast Smite Void Knight. So this is much lower damage than the Multistrike Smite, but it has max block and stuff like that, more range. But AoE is also not amazing on this, but you do have Devouring Orb helping you with AoE. But overall, this is like a weaker build than the others. I think the weakest Void Knight I have is this, but it's still a fun build. Tanky build with the block and stuff. So just self-cast Smite, Vitality stacking. Pretty simple, I think. And Rive Void Knight, so this is also a very high damage melee build. So I basically changed to Darkstride setup on this. They nerfed the skin boots. You can still go for them. They're a bit, they're more damage for bossing, but I wanted to make this as fast as possible. The Rive build, so Apathy's more Darkstride, lots of movement speed. So you can get a bunch of movement speed. You have so much flat void damage. I'm going for 2 LP here, so you want to slam the T7 void damage for, of course, damage and the movement speed, and you don't need T7 melee crit. So ideally you get 2 LP and you get T5 melee crit instead, and then on aspirational you can drop the T5 completely and go for attack speed, because you get crit from the relic here. And if you get Frenzy, by the way, on the relic on aspirational, you can just drop the helmet, but I didn't want to make changes based on the corruptions. You can go Seed. So this build, you can go Seed of Yggdrasil for tankiness, or you can go the Frenzy helmet for damage. And then you would have both Frenzy and Seed on the aspirational if you manage to get that. Yeah, I mean, otherwise this is quite similar again as the previous setup. But the new idols are going crazy with the echo damage, void damage. You can go crit multiplier. You can also get area. By the way, you can get area with Rive. So if you want to make like a kind of like a mapping setup, you maybe replace all of these with area. So it's gonna be a pretty nice AoE, and you also get the pull here from the tree, so you like pull enemies together. Quite nice, really nice node to get. I know some people go for Swordcatcher on this build. It was nerfed a lot recently, so I think Swordcatcher is only good if you go for like full frenzy stacking with, you know, like rampancy on sub or something like vitality rampancy. You get frenzy effect. Maybe you go for the frenzy belt as well, with perma frenzy on the relic. Maybe I make a variant, but it was like super nerfed Swordcatcher, so it's not really good. And I mean, Abyssal Echoes is crazy. You get Doom also on this, so you don't need to go for Siphon rings, Doom rings. So you can go for like Red Ring, Flames of Midnight combo, really good. And this weapon also has like way lower like roll range compared to Swordcatcher. Swordcatcher is like very high, like from 1 to 6 or something like that on the skills and stuff like that. So this is definitely the best weapon to go for, and you can get the insane movement speed. All right, so that was the Void Knight. Let's go into the Paladin. So let's start with the Judgement. I think a classic two builds here. So we have the classic Judgement first, the Stacker, the Spammer, the Season 2 Destroyer, you know, winner of the race and all that stuff. So I upgraded this build a decent bit, so it's still very similar to the Season 2 version, but mostly like changing the boots and the helmet. So again, trying to get rid of all the Exalted that we can get rid of. So these boots give you reduced crit, and then you don't need Leonine helmet anymore. You can go for Decayed Skull, because you also get from this passive, you get reduced crit. So you're basically like guaranteed to cap your crit reduction with these boots. You can still go for, you know, the Weaver boots, the you know, the damage over time reduced boots, but this is also like a very fast boot. It also gives you even some increased damage. And this helmet is actually very good, so armor applies to dots and stuff like that. So this setup, very, very tanky. Of course, as always, very tanky. I guess I haven't actually made a video for this build in a while, so this is also kind of new, I guess. I mean, this was here already in the last season, but using this amulet, this primordial. So really nice combo with the Null Portent. So basically, you don't need to build any Void Necro Poison res. All of those are going to be physical damage instead. You get really good stats on this also, like armor applied to dot, attunement armor, like a really amazing tank amulet. And you know, null portent, you want to overcap the res, but now you only need to overcap the elemental resistances and physical, so you don't need these resistances. You still get the full DR, so very insane like damage reduction combo, and easy to get. You know, of course, this also pretty much 1 LP stuff. You kind of want to get 2 LP on some items, but very easy to acquire, and then you add corruptions on top of that. You can get a bunch of things like 50% area, for example, here is quite useful. And the Judgement Aura build, so this is new on max roll. This patch, this build has been in the game for a long time, but we only now had the time and all that to make it on max roll, and it was also very buffed this season because of the new, you know, the buffs to this item. So you get a bunch of health and mana per attunement. This used to be lower values and also higher LP last season. So now you can easily get this with like 2 LP or even more, and it's much better item. So on this build, you want to stack a bunch of mana, and then you use the Judgement mana consume node to get a bunch of damage basically. And this is like aura version of the Judgement. So instead of spamming, we just, you know, have 1 aura around you. You can only have 1 of these, but you get a bunch of more damage on this. This deals about 4 times the DPS of the Judgement Paladin, but, you know, has no block. It's definitely not as tanky. It can get like more HP though, so that's nice. And the main ideas on this build, so using Chulra rings, so basically you can snapshot the aura. So what you do is you have this bit of a rotation here for the aura. So we're using a bunch of buffs like Javelin. You get the more Judgement damage, and then you evade to triple the stats on the star dials. You cast Holy Aura, and then you use Judgement. So then you get the aura lasts for 12 seconds, and it's gonna be snapshot with all the buffs you applied. So double Chula rings. You can also go on the you know, for mapping, you can go like 1 Chula ring, for example, and then Flames of Midnight for movement speed. I think I would do that for mapping, because it's not like you need the damage. This deals insane damage. So endgame planner is more than 50 million DPS. So very, very like absurd damage. Especially you can get, of course, the new idols, just like on the other Judgment. This one I don't go singularity on endgame because you need the res, but then you can do that on aspirational for a bit more, 2% more damage basically from the altar. But yeah, crazy damage build, still tanky, so it's definitely not squishy as you would expect. I mean, it's a paladin, right? So, and the items on this build, otherwise, you have the same boots, Decayed Skull setup, Nihilist, you want increased mana. So increased mana is very high value. Flat mana, not so much, so you get a lot of flat mana already. Twisty Heart for stats, so +5 to Judgment, same as on the normal Judgment. Using these gloves in the end game, so you get a bunch of damage. You can still use them on aspirational, but this is like a lot of tankiness if you go for the Immortal Vice. So that's up to you. Do you want tankiness or damage? But this build has so much damage anyways that you don't really need. And you can get nice corruptions like this, like increased mana regen per max mana. So also max mana on the affix. You can also get area here if you wanna get like more clear speed. You can get AOE. You can get idle corruptions with mana regen per max mana, really good. So that helps with the mana sustain. But yeah, overall this build, very, very strong, very, very strong build. I find it like boring to play, because it's just like kind of like Righteous Fire, I guess you could say. So you just like, it's like a walking simulator. So personally, I don't like the playstyle, but I know many people do, and it's a very, very strong build. So. Then we have Smite Paladin, so this is a new build for the patch, but of course the playstyle is very classic. So also using the Xylem staff here for attunement stacking. So you want a lot of mana for devotion, so it gives you cast speed per missing mana, and more importantly, it gives you flat spell damage per 5 missing mana, so you can scale this very high. And again, we're stacking mana, so we're getting the attunement stacking. Also HP, so this is going to be a very, very tanky setup as well. So lots of HP, and then you get Twisty Heart, and you're actually using the ward conversion this time. So you're casting an elemental spell, so this is going to be lightning damage on the smite. So you can get like on endgame planner like 5 to 6k HP, but a lot of HP, and then about the same as ward. So it's going to be very, very tanky, even though it doesn't have block. And otherwise on this build, we're using Meteor Belt to automatically reduce the mana to 0, because you want to be 0 mana for maximum value on devotion. So basically when you crit, you cast meteors, and then they have a high mana cost, so you don't need to use anything else to like lower your mana. I know some people use like Abyssal Echoes or Judgment even, or stuff like that, but you have so much mana on this build, you can get like 2k mana and more, so you want it to be easy and nice. And then also Glacier Helmet, so when you evade, you also consume a bunch of mana. So mapping, you can just map like any other Smite build, you don't need to ever worry about the mana stuff. And we're going for this node here, so out of mana cost is 0, so you don't care if you are out of mana. And increased mana, once again, very useful, so ideally you get 2 LPs on these. Mountain Boots, so this is the only boot that gives you like a good amount of attunement. And also getting all attributes is very, very good for Red Ring, and also stuff like intelligence is good for ward retention, strength, gives you endurance, so you don't need to build it on Holy Aura. You could do it though, like if you want like a higher movement speed boot, just use unspec these damage node here, get the endurance here. You use stuff like Blood of the Exile, for example, so for mapping you can do that. But this is like the optimal boot otherwise, but the movement speed is for sure lower than other boots. And 1 Phantom Grip to cap your crit chance, 1 Red Ring, so nice setup with that. This really solves the crit easily, so you want 1 Phantom Grip instead of double Red Rings. And other than that, pretty normal like spell crit gloves and stuff. Idols full like Smite increased damage. We kind of need this res idols here. If you somehow get like a bunch of res, maybe D5 here or something, physical res, you could go for like double huge idols, like like crit chance, HP or something. But yeah, you also get, by the way, reduced crit per heretical idol suffix, so you can easily cap your reduction, even though you have also blind on smite, because but it's a nice kind of free suffix to get, so might as well get it. On aspirational, a bunch of nice things like increased mana, mana per attunement. So this one wants to get a bunch of mana for the damage. Haste, getting traversal haste here is actually very solid because you can't get haste otherwise. Crit Hammerdin. So this is actually a very, very nicely buffed build. It was already good last season, but now it's even better. So this weapon, which is like you must have this weapon to play the build, because that's the only way you deal AoE damage on the build. You basically throw one single hammer and it's gonna have this like rippling AoE overkill effect with this weapon. So you must have this, and it got buffed. So this is 15 base crit now instead of 9 base crit, and gives you 15 all attributes instead of 9 all attributes. So incredibly strong weapon, and this is basically build enabling, like I said, for this build. So how this works is you throw one hammer and you max out all the damage you possibly can. So you can only throw one hammer, you get attack speed per projectile, you get damage per projectile, and really good setup for hammer. The best hammer build overall, this crit setup. Very fast, you can get a bunch of movement speed. Also going for grappling, you don't need your evade, just you can get like 150 movement speed even on, you know, endgame planner, and then you get perma haste here as well, because you can already get haste from Holy Aura by hitting enemies, and this gives you haste effect and stuff like that. So throwing builds can get really fast. Also, there's another buff on this build, so you get this. You always get this node, I mean, it's a travel node. You get hammers cannot be dodged now, so that's nice. And then you get this here, so hammers pass through terrain. So previously the hammers could like basically stop when it hit like a terrain or something. Some maps had like bugs and stuff, so now they can never stop. So this is really good. So your hammers don't get eaten by terrain basically. So very, very solid build. And it's quite tanky as well, even though no block is of course a downside, but you definitely don't want to go Forge Guard on this. Forge Guard is way lower damage. Sure, you get the block, but way lower damage, and it's so slow. So I would not recommend Forge Guard. On Bleed Hammerdin, so this is, I mean, it's a weaker version of hammers, but instead it's a bleed build. Using Carrion Gloves or to convert a bunch of ailments to bleed, and then just maxing the bleed damage, so the usual bleed items, the boots and stuff. The problem with this build is that you want exalted items. This is 4 exalted items, and this is like the optimal setup. So that's why it's like a lower, kind of a lower tier build. It deals great damage and stuff like that, but especially on big bosses like Aberroth, because you know you can hit with all the with many hammers. So damage is good, tankiness is good, but so many exalted items because you want a bunch of affixes. So you would need like 3 LP on every item. And I mean, the base items are also amazing, of course, on Sentinel. So, and you also want the minus mana cost here on the rings. So if you don't need the minus mana cost, maybe you max roll the Nihilist or something. Maybe you don't use this node, the Orbit node, so it's lower mana cost. Then you can use some other rings, but you need a bunch of stats. You need res as well. So that's kind of the downside here, but still a very solid setup. Bunch of idols with bleed duration, so you can get more now with Pyramid, and you can get by with just one of these Smite idols, so save space. So you can get a bunch more increased physical damage, bleed duration. So damage went up by quite a bit on this build. And then we have Shield Throw. So this is also a fast build, high movement speed. I changed the torch to this dagger here on the endgame planner. You still go for it on starter, but this is very good for the crit chance and movement speed and the stats it has. Good damage. You actually really need the base crit, and there's not really like good primordials to use on this build. Otherwise, it's quite similar to other throwing setups, but you get the shield here for reflect scaling, but they nerfed the idols this patch, so you get less reflect damage per idol. So this is basically per 10 reflect you get +1 flat damage. You still get a bunch of these idols, but also going for the new fork idols on the OMENS here, and then one of these you need to throw on also for damage. So otherwise pretty similar to the other stuff. You need the minion to double your bossing damage, so you basically ricochet your shield back from the minion to you, and the boss is gonna be hit twice. And then we still have Javelin. So this is very similar to the previous patch, just changed the helmet to mask, and again, very similar throwing setup. High movement speed, good damage. Very solid setup, Javelin, but nothing has really like changed. The throwing does go hard with the idols, so you get like a bunch of these like throwing, crit multi, flat damage on the corruption. You can get a lot more damage now on throwing builds. And on Forge Guard, I have a couple of builds as well. So I would say Forge Guard overall is the weakest Sentinel Mastery, but there's still a good build here. So we can start with the Multistrike. I would say this is the best melee setup that we have on Forge Guard. So basically using Multistrike now instead of going for the Smite thing, we're just using it for damage, and it's quite a high damage skill because you have the the Blade Storm node, so you can hit multiple times basically on single target, and you can get a bunch of these idols now with the Multistrike armament stacks as well, and we're using the Frenzy belt, so stacking a bunch of strength on Forge Guard, you can easily get like 150 strength on endgame planners. On a Forge Guard, so you get a bunch of Frenzy effect, and then you also scale the more melee damage while you have Frenzy. So all of these, while you have Frenzy affixes or stats, they scale with increased effect of Frenzy. So this belt was bugged in the previous patch, but now it's fixed. And of course the Doom belt also is gone for like non-void builds, so we need a new DPS belt. So Fangs is the way to go. And Forge Guard is perfect for stacking strength. So on this build, we're using a shield and a spear. So this spear is the best physical weapon. So if you want to get like a physical weapon for your build, this is the thing to go for. So better than something like Sword Catcher, for example. Again, even though we're stacking a bunch of Frenzy effect, this is still better. Also gives you base crit on the implicit, which is amazing. Also on Forge Guard, you can get this passive here for 5% extra base crit with a spear, so really good. Uhkeiros shield, bunch of strength. We don't care about the mana cost because this is basically mana consumption, this node. So mana is definitely something you need to consider. So the more idols you have with this Multistrike affix, the more mana you consume. So you want to get like an Nihilus with high mana roll. You want to get 1 mana regen here if you have many idols like this, but this is a lot of damage that gets added with the idols. And these Forge Guard setups are quite tanky, so you get a bunch of less damage taken, you get max block chance, you get basically infinite armor. So I quite like these builds. I think one of the main downsides on Forge Guard is, it's slow, because you basically disable haste. You get block chance instead from it, which is okay, but you disable haste when you go two-hand and a shield. I think they should get rid of that downside, but it is what it is. Also, the mastery bonus is quite weak, just some resistances and some armor, but maybe they buff these someday, and then it's even better. But this is actually like a very high DPS build, the Multistrike, if you get all the gear and stuff. And then on Forge Strike we have a similar setup, but instead we go for this shield because you don't want a higher mana cost on the ability. So this one is placed the same as something like the Judgement Paladin, the classic Judgment. So Forge Strike, high mana cost ability, and then you use Vengeance for mana. So very similar gameplay to Judgment. Instead it's crit and Forge Guard. Quite a fun build, I think. It's like nice AoE and stuff. You're bonking with this Anvil Forge Strike. And on these Omen idols, by the way, we can get Frenzy effect. So this is like 100% increased Frenzy effect. So basically same as having extra 200 strength for this build. So if you get all the corruptions on the idols on these Frenzy stackers, kind of crazy. On Shield Bash, some improvements, bunch of improvements. Again, Frenzy belt. So this build doesn't care about attack speed. You can't scale the attack speed of Shield Bash with like normal sources, but we still want the Frenzy belt for more damage, and you get even more strength on this than on the other ones, a little bit more, so 170 almost on endgame, like 200 on aspirational, so you still want the Frenzy belt, lots of damage. This one is, I think, for sure the slowest build out of these Forge Guard builds, Forge Guard melee builds, because we're using Event Horizon as well. So slows you down, but you can evade to get rid of the buff. But good damage, tanky. but just slow build. But otherwise, it's similar to before. So this build wants to get a bunch of block chance, block effect, strength for damage. Also, the idols are pretty nice on this, as always, so you can get a bunch of block effectiveness. So block effect also increases your damage on this build. And on Rogue, I have a couple of builds. So Heartseeker, I made a full rework. So this is now just Reign of Winter, so no more Dragon Song stuff. Reign of Winter just makes way more sense to always play it like that. So you can get the long range, you can be safe, far away. You still get amazing damage, and in real gameplay, like Reign of Winter is just way better because you don't have to be melee range like for Dragon Song, and you also don't need to worry about stuff like mana or anything. You never care about mana on this setup. So now going for Reliquary Nest, buffing the new idol setup with recurve, chance, idols, and increased damage. So you can get a lot of increased damage from the idols, and you also get armor from this altar. So trying to get the defense up as well, and yeah, full cold damage. So using these rings, heirloom rings before you get red rings. I wanted to have endgame without red rings on this build. It's quite like important to to show how you get your resistances, because you're using Morning Frost for minus resistance. Overall, a solid marksman build, easy to play, fast. One button spamming. Of course, on marksman, the sad thing is like there's not really good skills to use. Not much at all. So Heartseeker smoke bomb for traversal now, because they removed the shuriken like auto cast blade armor stuff from shift, so you actually need to direct cast shurikens now for the blade armor. So smoke bomb traversal is really good though, so you get this like long leap. Puncture, you proc this with the Heartseeker when target dies, so more AoE, and Dark Quiver just for frenzy and some Dust Crowd and stuff. But like this is like very like these two skills are pretty low value, but just not much things to use. I don't think the new Shadow Rend skill is good, but maybe there's something there that can be found, but doesn't look very good at least. But I mean, overall on this Heartseeker setup, damage went up a lot. Survivability is good, and range is amazing now. You can also get this new affixes, by the way, on Corruption. Like you can basically get the bow Reign of Winter effect on Quiver and bow Corruption. So you get almost, if you get double T7, it's almost like getting another Reign of Winter. So if you get these Corruptions, I think it's going to be actually quite crazy. Also, they actually fixed this concentration. This used to be bugged, so now it just gives you more damage for everything. Used to be, I think, only more bow damage. So now it also gives you more damage for the spell, Reign of Winter. So that's the Heartseeker. Then on Bleed Falcon, this is a C tier build, so I wouldn't really recommend playing this, but we'll still have it, because it's still playable. But damage is quite low. It's actually, I mean, it did get a lot of damage back now with the new idols, because this was nerfed many times before. But all of these like Bleed Chance to Falcon idols, pretty decent, but it's not like an insane build. It's quite tanky though, so max block and stuff like that on Falconer. But yeah, and on Primalist I have some builds as well. So we have the same type of like melee frenzy belt setups here as on Forge Guard. So this is very similar with Upheaval. The spear once again, physical damage build. So and then stacking strength and frenzy effect, and you can also get the enchant here on Primalist, the melee damage while you have frenzy, and this also scales with the effect of frenzy. So we're going, instead of going Omen idols, we're going full like heretical with the enchantment. And one of these aftershock idols is needed. So now you can save space by just getting one Omen idol instead of these adorned idols. So you can proc your aftershock. So basically, on these Primalist melee builds, you want to get your main skill, and then you want to proc the aftershock for more damage. So Upheaval is the main damage. Quite a nice AoE on this, because they actually buffed these AoE nodes here. We're not using a maze on this, but you get a bunch of area from this node, and then you can get Shockwave on the chest. So you get this like AoE explosion. Quite nice. Damage is very solid. I think the main downside on this build is the buff micromanagement. So you have a bunch of these like buffs on Beastmaster that are super strong, like the Wolf Howl buff you wanna use, Totem, Warcry. This also gives you crit chance and everything. So like you wanna keep like having these buffs up, and it's a lot of like button pressing for max damage. Of course, for mapping you don't need all the damage, but for bosses, so that's I think that's the downside, the main downside. Otherwise, this is a very solid build actually. Damage is good. It's quite tanky and stuff like that. And they buffed Upheaval quite a bit this patch, so the damage effectiveness is higher, so like 30% more damage from that. Some of the nodes like this one is better. Mana cost is still, I mean, you still need the minus mana nodes, but this setup doesn't, it's not as high attack speed as some other ones I had before on Upheaval, so mana is not an issue really, and you have Nihilist nowadays. I used to have this build like many years ago basically, but you have Nihilist nowadays also for mana regen, and for bosses you can stand still with the mana cost reduction on mountain boots. So very fun melee Upheaval build. And swipe, so this is a classic swipe Werebear. This used to be, I think, one of my most watched build videos is the swipe Werebear from like 3 years ago or something. Used to be lightning back then, but now it's physical damage. And tanky setup, tankier than the Upheaval. You're Werebear, you have a bunch of HP and stuff like that. You're spamming swipe, and then you again proc aftershocks. And similar setup with the idols here. The frenzy effect and stuff. You're dual wielding undisputed and this weaver item. So you can't get LP on this. It's a weaver item, but it's amazingly strong weapon. If you just get the right affixes, bunch of crit chance and crit multiplier and stuff like that. So really good. So the downside on this build is the kind of like mediocre damage. You can get like decent damage now with the frenzy belt, but swipe is just not a high damage ability. So I'm hoping they buff this soon, maybe next patch or something. Maybe they should buff the nodes, they should buff the base damage. But I really like this this build. It's like very satisfying to play. It's kind of like a classic melee build, and it still deals enough damage to clear the game for sure. But I wouldn't really go do something like Uber with this. I think it's gonna take a long time if you want to do Uber, but other than that, it's very fun. And the last build we have here is Avalanche Shaman. So this is a new setup for Avalanche with the Xylem staff. So attunement stacking is very good on Shaman as well, not just Paladin. So Avalanche is like a super high mana cost skill. So getting the max mana helps a lot. So instead of trying to build a lot of mana regen, we build attunement for HP and mana, and also gives you increased damage as always on the skill. You have a bunch of like attunement nodes here. Amazing, they buffed this recently, or this patch. Plus 16 now instead of plus 8 with max points. This build is good damage, great AoE. It's like a very big AoE Avalanche. And then you have really good tankiness also, because Twisty Heart, you're spamming an elemental spell, so you have a bunch of HP. So similar setup for the tankiness as on Smite Paladin, for example. Twisty Heart, element stacking. And on this one you need Urza's Pride for the mana regen, because you still want mana regen, even if you have a lot of max mana. But basically you have so much max mana on this that you don't need to go for something like Apathy Corruption. Basically Apathy turns your attunement from giving mana into giving mana regen, but you have so much maximum mana that you're not gonna run out, and your mana regen is still good. So especially with Aspirational, you have so much mana that any boss is gonna die anyways by that point. So good damage on this, tanky, nice to play maps. Movement speed is not the highest because we're using mountain boots, but it's just too amazing to not use. And but like very good. You can basically click once on a pack of enemies and it's gonna die to the avalanche. You're moving around and it's deals damage while moving, so really good. Otherwise pretty normal, like Blood Mage gloves, double red rings are amazing if you get them. This helmet is just for stats, so a bunch of increased HP and leech, so 40% increased HP from this item. You just need 1 LP anyways. Also, I didn't want to go for any like spree gun or anything. I just wanted to make this very smooth to play. This is extremely simple to play. The only skills you have to use here is Warcry, Avalanche, and then Free Leap for movement. So you can just hold down, like for bosses, you can just hold down the Warcry to cast it on cooldown. It's gonna give you crit chance and stuff like that, increased damage, and then you just spam Avalanche. So incredibly simple to play. and just max out the damage on Avalanche, get the storm stacks here. So this basically spawns the bolts from Gathering Storm bolts. So you're doing damage with Avalanche, you're doing damage with the storm bolts, and we also get a bunch of Maelstrom stacks from this. So when you expend a storm stack, you have a chance to cast Maelstrom, and this gives you perma frenzy, perma haste, and now with the new, also dodge by the way, and now with the new buffed Tsunami, I'm not sure how good this is, but I expect it, because I mean, either you get this or you get the stun. This is good, but you're already like perma freezing kinda with this. But if this ends up being bad, of course I then expect the stun instead. But the Tsunami is actually pretty high damage effectiveness, 300%, and so every fifth Maelstrom stack gained, you cast this like Tsunami spell, and it has pretty insane damage multipliers. So you can get like, you should be able to get like, you know, 30 stacks at least of Maelstrom. So this is like almost 2000% more damage per Maelstrom stack, but it's only, you know, cast every so often. But we'll see, it might be fun, you know. Maybe improves the bossing DPS, maybe improves the clear a bit. But if it's bad, then I just unspec that. Torn Totem automatically cast with the Totem Idol. So I went quite conservative on the endgame setup on the idols, because you need the Torn Totem, you know, you need to cap your crit avoidance with the idols and stuff like that. So then aspirational, I go full Omen idols instead. So these actually give you quite a bit of value, the Omen idols. So yeah, that's all my builds. Hopefully I didn't miss any build. If you want to find all my builds here, you can just type Volga on the search. It's gonna, you know, highlight all of mine. And we also have a bunch of other builds, of course, from other creators, Bina, Lizard. Terek has new leveling builds. So you can check the tier list for all the builds we have. And yeah, have fun in the new season, and I'll see you in the next one.